Marcus Chen was once the deadliest human in known space, a warrior so skilled that entire alien fleets would retreat at the mention of his name. But, when he defied orders to save innocent lives, the very military that made him cast him out into the cold void of exile. Now, bleeding and broken on a forgotten world, Marcus discovers something that will change everything: a nest of dragon eggs, abandoned and defenseless. The same instinct that got him banished, the need to protect those who cannot protect themselves, awakens once more. But these are no ordinary dragons. They are the last remnants of an ancient species whose ancestors once ruled the stars. And, when Marcus makes the ultimate sacrifice to guard their nest, he unknowingly sets in motion events that will shake the foundations of galactic power. The dragons remember. They honor debts. And they never forget those who showed them kindness. This is the story of how one human's final act of compassion ignited a bond between species that would either save the galaxy or burn it to ashes. Prepare for a tale where honor transcends death, where loyalty defies logic, and where humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons, it's our willingness to die for what's right. The escape pod's hull groaned as it sliced through the atmosphere of the unnamed planet, its heat shields glowing cherry red against the alien sky. Inside the cramped compartment, Marcus Chen pressed his hand against the bleeding wound in his side and watched the ground rush up to meet him. The pod's navigation systems had failed 3 days ago, along with the life support, communications array, and most of his hopes for survival. He had been drifting in space for 2 weeks since his court-martial and banishment from the Terran Defense Corps. 2 weeks since he had watched his military career, 15 years of distinguished service, crumble because he had chosen to save civilian lives instead of following orders. The brass had called it insubordination. Marcus called it being human. The pod slammed into the planet's surface with bone-jarring force, throwing Marcus against the bulkhead. Stars exploded across his vision as his head struck metal, and, for a moment, everything went dark. When consciousness returned, he could taste blood in his mouth and hear the hiss of atmosphere escaping through a crack in the hull. Marcus forced himself to move, his enhanced combat reflexes overriding the pain that lanced through his body. Years of battlefield experience had taught him that the first few minutes after a crash were critical. He needed to assess his situation, secure his equipment, and find shelter before his injuries or the environment killed him. The pod's emergency systems flickered weakly as he checked his gear. His combat armor was damaged but functional, the power cells showing 60% charge. His plasma rifle had suffered a cracked housing but might still fire a few shots. Emergency rations for 5 days, water recycler damaged, medical kit intact but limited. The assessment was grim but not hopeless. He had survived worse odds during the siege of Kepler Station. The pod's hatch hissed open, and Marcus stepped onto alien soil for the first time. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth standard, and the air carried strange scents, something like cinnamon mixed with ozone. 2 suns hung in the purple-tinted sky, one large and orange, the other smaller and brilliant white. The landscape around him was a mixture of crystalline formations and twisted trees with silver bark and blue leaves. As he gathered his supplies, Marcus noticed something odd about the crash site. The ground around his pod showed signs of recent disturbance, deep gouges in the earth that looked almost like claw marks. Massive ones. He had seen similar marks during the war against the Zephyrian Collective, but these were different. Older somehow, and more deliberate. His enhanced hearing caught a sound that made him freeze, a low, rhythmic rumble that seemed to come from deep underground. It reminded him of the purring of a massive cat, if cats were the size of battle cruisers. The sound was both beautiful and terrifying, unlike anything in his extensive combat database. Marcus decided to explore cautiously, his training taking over despite his injuries. The plasma rifle felt comforting in his hands as he moved through the crystalline forest, following what appeared to be a worn path through the strange terrain. The dual suns cast bizarre shadows that seemed to shift and dance around him, making depth perception challenging. After an hour of careful progress, he discovered the source of the path. Ahead of him, carved into the side of a massive cliff, was an entrance that could only be described as magnificent. The opening was perfectly circular, easily 50 meters across, and framed by intricate carvings that seemed to glow with their own inner light. The symbols were unlike anything he had seen in his travels across the galaxy, neither the geometric patterns of the Zephyrians nor the flowing script of the Valdari Confederation. The rumbling sound was stronger here, and Marcus could feel it in his bones. His combat instincts screamed at him to retreat, to find another shelter, to avoid whatever created sounds that deep and powerful. But something else drew him forward, a sense that this place was important somehow, that fate had guided his damaged pod to this specific location. As he approached the entrance, his armor's sensors went wild. The readings made no sense: massive heat signatures that seemed to pulse like living hearts, energy patterns that defied known physics, and electromagnetic fields that interfered with his equipment. Whatever lived in this place was beyond his understanding, but it was definitely alive and definitely massive. Marcus paused at the threshold, torn between self-preservation and curiosity. In his 15 years of military service, he had learned to trust his instincts. Right now, those instincts were giving him contradictory signals. Danger, certainly, but not malevolent danger. It felt more like approaching a sleeping giant than entering a predator's lair. The decision was made for him when he heard voices echoing from within the cavern. Human voices, speaking in urgent, frightened tones. His enhanced hearing picked out words: nest, eggs, and "they're coming back soon." The voices were moving deeper into the cavern, and there was an urgency to them that suggested immediate danger. Marcus had been banished for protecting civilians. He was not about to stop now. He entered the glowing passage, his rifle ready but not quite raised to firing position. The walls around him were smooth and, warm to the touch, covered in the same strange symbols that had decorated the entrance. The carvings seemed to react to his presence, glowing brighter as he passed, creating an ethereal light that eliminated the need for his suit's illumination systems. The passage sloped downward, widening as it descended. The rumbling sounds grew stronger, and Marcus began to realize they were not coming from a single source. Multiple creatures, breathing in rhythm, somewhere deep in the mountain. The scale of whatever he was approaching made his mouth go dry with nervous anticipation. After what felt like an eternity of walking, the passage opened into a cavern so vast that his suit's ranging systems could not find the far walls. The space was dimly lit by more glowing symbols, but what light there was revealed something that stopped Marcus in his tracks. Eggs. Dozens of them, each one easily 3 meters tall and glowing with the same soft light as the wall carvings. They were arranged in precise patterns across the cavern floor, and the beauty of the sight took Marcus's breath away. The shells seemed to be made of some kind of crystalline material that pulsed with inner fire, and he could swear he saw movement within some of them. Dragon eggs. He knew it with absolute certainty, though he had never seen such things before. The knowledge seemed to come from somewhere deeper than memory, as if the sight awakened something primal in his human consciousness. Near the center of the nest, he spotted the source of the voices: 3 figures in environmental suits, clearly human, working frantically around several of the eggs. They were installing some kind of device, and Marcus's combat experience immediately identified it as an explosive charge. "Stop," he called out, his voice echoing through the vast space. "Step away from the eggs." The 3 figures spun around, and Marcus could see their faces through their helmet visors. 2 men and a woman, all bearing the insignia of the hegemony, the same star-spanning empire that had banished him. Their leader, a scarred man with colonel's insignia, raised a pulse weapon. "Marcus Chen," the colonel said, his voice filled with recognition and disgust. "The disgraced hero himself. I should have known we'd find you skulking around some backwater planet." "Colonel Morrison," Marcus replied, his own weapon now trained on the group. He remembered Morrison from the academy: ambitious, ruthless, and completely without honor. "Still serving the hegemony's darker interests, I see. These eggs are a threat to galactic stability," Morrison declared. "Our xenobiologists have confirmed what they are. Dragons, Chen. The same species that nearly destroyed human civilization 3,000 years ago. We cannot allow them to hatch." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Dragons were legend, myth, stories told to children about the time before humans reached the stars. But, looking at the magnificent eggs around him, he began to understand that some legends were rooted in truth. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he said quietly. "These eggs are ancient, protected. You're about to commit genocide." Morrison laughed harshly. "Genocide? These monsters destroyed entire worlds, Chen. They burned our colonies and enslaved our people. The only good dragon is a dead dragon." "That was 3,000 years ago," Marcus countered. "Whatever happened then, these eggs had nothing to do with it. They're innocent." "Innocent?" Morrison's voice rose. "There is no innocence in this species. The hegemony has studied the old records. Dragons are incapable of coexistence. They see all other species as either servants or prey. As they argued, Marcus became aware that the rumbling sounds were changing. The rhythm was faster now, more agitated. Something was stirring in the depths of the mountain, and he had the distinct impression that their raised voices were disturbing whatever slept there. "Set down your weapon, Chen," Morrison ordered. "You're outnumbered and outgunned. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Marcus looked at the eggs surrounding them, their crystalline surfaces pulsing with patient life. In his mind, he could see the faces of the civilians he had saved during his last mission, families with children, elderly couples, young people with their whole lives ahead of them. The hegemony had wanted him to abandon them to focus on military targets. He had refused then, and he would refuse now. "I can't do that, Colonel," he said, his voice steady despite the pain in his side. "I won't let you murder innocent lives." "Then, you'll die defending monsters," Morrison snarled, raising his weapon. The cavern erupted in weapons fire as both sides opened up simultaneously. Marcus dove behind one of the larger eggs, using its crystalline surface as cover while returning fire. His enhanced reflexes and superior marksmanship immediately put Morrison's team at a disadvantage, but he was outnumbered and wounded. Plasma bolts struck the cavern walls, sending sparks cascading through the air. The eggs remained unharmed, their crystalline shells seemed to absorb or deflect the energy weapons without sustaining damage. But the noise and violence was clearly having an effect on whatever slept deeper in the mountain. The rumbling was becoming a roar. Marcus managed to eliminate one of Morrison's soldiers with a precisely aimed shot, but return fire caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him to the ground. Blood flowed freely from the new wound, and his vision began to blur from blood loss. "Give it up, Chen," Morrison called out. "You're bleeding out. Surrender now and I'll make your death quick." Instead of surrendering, Marcus triggered a smoke grenade from his belt and used the cover to change positions. He could feel his strength ebbing with each heartbeat, but something kept driving him forward. Perhaps it was stubbornness, perhaps it was duty, or perhaps it was the certainty that what Morrison intended was simply wrong. The battle continued for several more minutes, with Marcus slowly gaining the upper hand despite his wounds. His superior training and experience began to tell, and Morrison's remaining soldier fell to another precise shot. But victory came at a cost. Marcus had taken 2 more hits, and he could feel his body beginning to shut down from trauma and blood loss. Morrison himself was wounded now, his left arm hanging useless at his side. But he still held his weapon, and his eyes burned with fanatic determination. "You cannot stop progress, Chen," he gasped. "The hegemony will never allow these monsters to threaten humanity again. Even if you kill me, others will come." Marcus struggled to his feet, his rifle wavering in his unsteady grip. The cavern seemed to be spinning around him, and he could taste copper in his mouth. "Maybe," he admitted. "But not today. Not while I'm still breathing." Their final exchange of fire was almost simultaneous. Morrison's shot took Marcus in the chest, punching through his damaged armor and sending him sprawling among the dragon eggs. Marcus's return shot struck Morrison's center mass, dropping the colonel where he stood. As darkness began to close in around the edges of Marcus's vision, he became aware that the rumbling from the depths had stopped completely. The cavern was silent except for the sound of his own labored breathing and the gentle humming of the eggs around him. He tried to stand but found that his body would no longer obey his commands. Blood pooled beneath him, warm and dark against the crystalline floor. With tremendous effort, he managed to drag himself to a position between the eggs and the entrance to the cavern, his back against one of the larger shells. If more hegemony troops came, they would have to go through him first. As consciousness faded, Marcus thought he heard something new, a sound like wind chimes mixed with distant music, coming from the eggs themselves. It was beautiful and sad and somehow grateful, as if the unborn dragons within could sense his sacrifice. His last coherent thought was a simple one: he had kept his promise. The innocent were safe, at least for now. Then, the darkness claimed him, and Marcus Chen, the Banished Combatant, breathed his last defending creatures he had never seen and would never know. The first thing Marcus became aware of was warmth. Not the artificial heat of his armor's environmental systems, but something deeper and more organic, like sunlight filtering through leaves or the gentle heat of a fireplace. The second thing he noticed was that he was no longer in pain. The burning ache in his side, the sharp agony of his shoulder wound, the crushing weight in his chest, all of it was gone. For a moment, he wondered if he had died and somehow found his way to whatever afterlife awaited warriors who died protecting others. But, when he tried to open his eyes, the reality of his situation became immediately apparent. He was still in the dragon cavern, still surrounded by the magnificent crystal and eggs, but something fundamental had changed. The wounds that had been killing him were completely healed. His armor had been carefully removed and set aside, replaced by some kind of organic covering that felt like silk but looked like scales. Where his blood had pooled on the cavern floor, new growths of crystal had sprouted, creating beautiful formations that pulsed with gentle light. But the most startling change was in the eggs themselves. They were hatching. As Marcus watched in wonder, cracks appeared in the nearest shell, spreading outward in intricate patterns that resembled lightning or the branches of trees. Light spilled from the fissures, not the harsh glare of artificial illumination, but something warm and golden that seemed to carry weight and substance. A piece of shell fell away, revealing an eye. It was enormous, easily the size of Marcus's head, and colored like molten gold shot through with veins of silver. The eye blinked once, slowly, and focused on him with unmistakable intelligence. More shells began to crack and split as the dragon within struggled to emerge. Marcus found himself holding his breath as he witnessed something that no human had seen for millennia: the birth of a dragon. When the creature finally broke free of its crystalline prison, Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. The young dragon was magnificent beyond description. Its scales shifted color in the light, ranging from deep emerald to brilliant gold to rich purple. Its wings, though obviously not yet fully developed, already showed the promise of incredible span and power. But it was the creature's eyes that captured Marcus's attention, ancient, knowing, and filled with an intelligence that seemed to peer directly into his soul. The dragon looked at Marcus for a long moment, its great head tilted to one side in what almost seemed like curiosity. Then, to his complete amazement, it spoke. "You are the guardian," the dragon said, its voice like wind chimes mixed with thunder. The words appeared directly in Marcus's mind rather than through his ears. "You gave your life to protect us. We remember. We honor. We repay." More eggs were hatching now, and Marcus found himself surrounded by emerging dragons of various colors and sizes. Each one that broke free paused to look at him, their expressions filled with what could only be described as gratitude and reverence. "I don't understand," Marcus said aloud, surprised to find that his voice worked normally. "How am I alive? What happened to my wounds?" The first dragon, apparently the eldest or leader of the clutch, moved closer with surprising grace. Despite its massive size, it made no sound as it approached. "We are bonded to this place," the dragon explained. "Our life force is connected to the sacred stones that form our nest. When your blood touched our home, when you died defending us, the bond accepted you. You became part of our family, part of our power." Marcus looked down at his hands and noticed for the first time that his skin had a subtle, almost imperceptible shimmer to it, like scales that could only be seen when the light hit them just right. "You healed me," he said, beginning to understand. "But at what cost?" "No cost," another dragon assured him, this one smaller with scales that shifted between blue and silver. "Only benefit. You are human still, but more than human now. Stronger, faster, longer lived. The bond enhances rather than diminishes." As the dragons continued to emerge from their shells, Marcus began to notice that each one was unique not just in coloration but in personality. Some were curious and playful, investigating every aspect of their new environment with obvious delight. Others were more serious and contemplative, studying the cavern walls and the ancient symbols carved there. A few seemed to be natural warriors, testing their claws and wings with obvious martial intent. The eldest dragon, who had spoken to him first, introduced himself with a name that sounded like wine through canyon walls. In human terms, it translated roughly to Keeper of Ancient Memories, but Marcus found himself thinking of the creature as Keeper for simplicity. "We must speak of serious matters," Keeper said, his mental voice taking on a grave tone. "Your species, the humans, they fear us. This we understand from the memories of the attackers you defeated. They believe us to be monsters from their ancient past." Marcus nodded grimly. "There are legends about dragons among my people. Stories of war and destruction from thousands of years ago. Most humans believe dragons are extinct or never existed at all. The legends speak truth, but not complete truth," Keeper explained. "There was war between our peoples long ago. But it was not dragons who started this conflict. We were peaceful then, content to explore the stars and study the mysteries of existence. It was humans who came with weapons and demands. Another dragon, one whose scales seemed to be made of living shadow, joined the conversation. The humans of that time sought to enslave us, to use our natural abilities as tools for their empire. When we refused, they declared war upon all our kind. Marcus felt a chill run through him despite the warmth of the cavern. What happened? We defended ourselves, Keeper said simply. Perhaps too well. The war lasted centuries and devastated both our species. In the end, we chose exile rather than extinction. We fled to the far reaches of space and entered the Great Sleep, hoping that time would heal the wounds between our peoples. But some of us remained, the Shadow Dragon added. Hidden guardians who watched over the sleeping clutches, waiting for the time when peace might be possible again. Marcus looked around at the dozens of newly hatched dragons, each one representing incredible power and ancient wisdom. And now you're awake. What does that mean for the galaxy? That depends, Keeper said, on what kind of man you truly are, Marcus Chen. Before Marcus could ask what the dragon meant, he became aware of a new sound echoing through the cavern, the distant hum of engines and the rhythmic thud of military boots. The hegemony forces had arrived, just as Morrison had promised they would. They're coming, Marcus said, automatically reaching for his rifle before remembering it had been set aside with his armor. Yes, Keeper agreed calmly. And they come with weapons designed to kill dragons. Your Colonel Morrison was not the only one who knew of this place. The Shadow Dragon's scales rippled with what looked like suppressed anger. They bring the old weapons, fusion lances and quantum disruptors. Tools designed specifically for war against our kind. Marcus felt his enhanced hearing pick up the approaching sounds with crystal clarity. At least 50 soldiers, heavily armed and equipped for a major engagement. Combat mechs providing heavy support. This was not a small raid but a full military operation. You have to run, he said urgently. Get out of here while you still can. I'll buy you time. To his surprise, several of the dragons actually laughed, a sound like crystal bells ringing in harmony. Run? Keeper asked, amusement clear in his mental voice. Guardian, do you forget what we are? You're newly hatched, Marcus protested. You can't fight an entire military force. Watch and learn, the Shadow Dragon said with obvious anticipation. The sound of approaching soldiers was getting closer, echoing through the passages that led to the nest. Marcus could hear them setting up defensive positions and deploying heavy weapons. They were taking no chances this time. This is Colonel Hayes of the Hegemony Third Fleet, a voice boomed through the cavern, amplified by military sound systems. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now and we guarantee you will be treated according to military law. Marcus almost smiled at the absurdity of the demand. Military law regarding dragons probably consisted of a single sentence, shoot to kill. What do? He asked Keeper. We show them what dragons have learned during our long exile, the eldest dragon replied. We show them that we are not the monsters they believe us to be. Before Marcus could ask for clarification, the dragons began to move. But, instead of charging toward the entrance in a furious attack, they spread out through the cavern in a precise formation that spoke of ancient tactical knowledge. Their movements were so coordinated that they seemed almost like a single organism with many parts. The first hegemony soldiers appeared at the cavern entrance, their weapons raised and ready. What they saw made several of them stop in shocked amazement. Dozens of dragons arranged in a perfect defensive formation, with Marcus Chen standing in the center, apparently unharmed and very much alive. Shun! Colonel Hayes called out. Step away from the creatures. We're here to extract you. No extraction needed, Colonel, Marcus replied, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. I'm exactly where I need to be. You're under some kind of alien influence, Hayes insisted. These creatures have compromised your judgment. We're here to help you. Marcus looked around at the dragons surrounding him, magnificent beings of obvious intelligence and nobility, and then, back at the heavily armed soldiers who had come to commit genocide. The only thing that's been compromised here is your understanding of the situation, he said firmly. These are not monsters. They're refugees returning from exile to a galaxy that still wants them dead. Dragons cannot be trusted, Hayes declared. History has proven that beyond any doubt. Stand down, Chen. That's a direct order. I don't take orders from the hegemony anymore, Marcus replied. You made sure of that when you banished me. The standoff stretched for several tense moments, with neither side willing to make the first move. Marcus could feel the dragons around him radiating controlled power, like coiled springs waiting to be released. But there was no sense of bloodlust or aggression from them, only a calm readiness to defend themselves if necessary. It was Colonel Hayes who finally broke the stalemate by ordering his troops to open fire. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations to come, though few would believe the official reports. The dragons moved like liquid lightning, their bodies flowing around the energy weapons fire as if they could predict exactly where each shot would go. Their scales seemed to absorb or deflect the plasma bolts, turning deadly weapons into nothing more dangerous than colored lights. But, more impressive than their defensive capabilities was what the dragons did not do. Not a single human soldier was killed or even seriously injured in the battle that followed. Instead, the dragons used precision and restraint that spoke of incredible discipline and control. Weapons were melted into harmless slag by carefully controlled bursts of dragon fire. Combat armor was systematically disabled without harming the soldiers inside. Heavy equipment was turned into modern art through the precise application of elemental forces that human science could not explain. Within 10 minutes, the entire hegemony force had been effectively neutralized without a single casualty on either side. Colonel Hayes stood in the center of the cavern, his weapon gone, his armor powered down, staring up at Keeper with a mixture of fear and awe. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Dragons are creatures of rage and destruction. You should have killed us all." "We are what we choose to be," Keeper replied, his mental voice somehow reaching all the humans present. "Just as you are what you choose to be. We choose to be better than our past." Marcus stepped forward, still amazed by what he had witnessed. "The war between your peoples doesn't have to continue," he said to Hayes. "There's another path forward." The shadow dragon moved closer to the colonel, who flinched but held his ground. "Your legends remember only the violence," the dragon said gently. "But, before the war, humans and dragons worked together. We built wonders among the stars, explored mysteries that neither species could solve alone. That partnership could exist again." Hayes looked around at the dragons surrounding him, his military training warring with the evidence of his own eyes. "The hegemony will never accept this," he said finally. "They'll send fleets, orbital bombardment platforms. They'll turn this entire world into radioactive dust before they allow dragons to live." "Perhaps," Keeper acknowledged. "But perhaps not. Change begins with single choices, made by individuals who choose to be better than their fears." Marcus found himself thinking about his own journey, from decorated military officer to banished exile to something entirely new. Change was possible, but it required courage and the willingness to risk everything for what was right. "What are you proposing?" he asked the dragons. "A demonstration," Keeper said. "Let us show the galaxy what dragons and humans can accomplish together. Let us prove that cooperation is stronger than conflict." The shadow dragon's scales rippled with anticipation. "There are threats in the galaxy that neither humans nor dragons can face alone. Pirates, raiders, slavers who prey on the innocent. Let us hunt them together. Let us show both our peoples that the old enemies can become new allies." Marcus looked at Colonel Hayes, who was still processing what he had witnessed. "What do you think, Colonel? Ready to make history?" Hayes was quiet for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I think," he said carefully, "that I need to make some very interesting reports to my superiors." As the dragons began to gather around their human guests, Marcus realized that everything was about to change. The Banished Combatant had become something new, a bridge between species, a symbol of what was possible when beings chose cooperation over conflict. The ancient war was ending. A new age was about to begin. 3 months after the encounter in the Dragon Nest, Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the Starship Harmony's edge, watching through the viewport as his mixed crew of humans and dragons prepared for their most challenging mission yet. The ship itself was a marvel of hybrid technology, human engineering enhanced by dragonfire and ancient knowledge that predated most galactic civilizations. The past few months had been a whirlwind of change that had rippled across the known galaxy. Colonel Hayes had kept his word, submitting detailed reports to Hegemony Command that painted the dragons not as monsters but as potential allies. The response had been mixed. Some officials called for immediate military action, while others urged caution and further study. What had really changed the conversation was what happened next. The first joint human-dragon operation had targeted a notorious pirate fleet that had been terrorizing the Outer Rim colonies for years. The raiders called themselves the Iron Wolves, and they had gained a reputation for brutality that made hardened spacers nervous. They specialized in attacking refugee ships and isolated settlements, taking what they wanted and leaving destruction behind. The Iron Wolves had learned to fear human military patrols and avoid dragon territories, but they had never faced both species working in perfect coordination. The result had been spectacular and surprisingly merciful. Instead of destroying the pirate fleet, the combined force had systematically disabled every ship, captured every raider, and recovered stolen goods worth millions of credits. Not a single pirate had been killed, though many would spend the rest of their lives in rehabilitation programs designed to help them become productive members of society. The rescue of 3,000 refugees from the pirates' holding facilities had been broadcast across the galaxy's communication networks, showing humans and dragons working side by side to free the innocent and heal the wounded. The images were powerful enough to begin changing public opinion about both species. Now, as Marcus watched his crew prepare for their next mission, he reflected on how much his own life had changed. The bond with the dragons had enhanced his physical capabilities beyond anything he had imagined possible. His reflexes were faster, his senses sharper, and his endurance seemed almost limitless. But, more than that, he could feel the dragon's presence in his mind, not intrusive thoughts, but a constant awareness of their emotions and intentions that made coordination effortless. "Guardian," came Keeper's familiar mental voice, "we are approaching the target system." Marcus turned to see the great dragon positioned at a specially designed console that allowed him to interface directly with the ship's systems. The sight still amazed him, a creature of living legend operating technology that merged the best of both their civilizations. "What are we looking at?" Marcus asked, moving to stand beside his draconic partner. The main display lit up with a three-dimensional map of the Valdris system. 5 planets orbited a dying red giant star, but it was the 4th planet that held their attention. Valdris Prime had once been a thriving agricultural world with a population of 2 million humans and several alien species. 6 weeks ago, it had gone dark. The hegemony believes it was a plague, reported Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, one of the human crew members who had volunteered for the joint missions. But the planetary quarantine broadcast stopped after only 3 days, and there's been no response to any communication attempts. Marcus studied the tactical display with growing concern. A planet didn't just go silent without reason, especially not one with modern communications infrastructure and multiple space stations. "What about the orbital facilities?" he asked. "Still operational," Martinez replied, "but running on automated systems only. No life sign readings, no responses to hails. It's like everyone just disappeared." The shadow dragon Marcus had come to know as Whisper materialized beside him, literally materialized, as the creature had mastered the art of bending light around its body to become effectively invisible. "This has the feel of the old enemy," Whisper said, his mental voice carrying undertones of ancient worry. "There are forces in the galaxy that predate both our species. Things that sleep between the stars and wake only to feed." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. In his months of working with the dragons, he had learned that their knowledge of galactic history extended far beyond human records. They spoke of civilizations that had risen and fallen before humans had even developed agriculture, and of things that lurked in the dark spaces between worlds. "Are you talking about the Devourers?" he asked, remembering references from the most ancient dragon texts they had shared with him. Keeper's great head turned toward the display, his golden eyes reflecting the starlight from the dying sun. "Perhaps," he said gravely. "The pattern fits. A world full of life that suddenly falls silent. No signs of struggle, no debris fields from battle. Just emptiness." The Devourers were mentioned in the oldest dragon legends as entities that consumed not just life but the very essence of existence itself. Entire star systems had supposedly been drained of their vitality, leaving behind nothing but cold matter drifting in the void. "I thought they were myth," Marcus said. "So did we, until the Great War," Keeper replied. "It was a Devourer attack on one of our oldest colonies that finally convinced us to ally with the humans of that era. Some enemies are too great for any single species to face alone." Marcus looked around the bridge at his mixed crew. Humans and dragons had been working together for only a few months, but already they had achieved things that neither species could have accomplished separately. If the Devourers were real and active again, they would need that cooperation more than ever. "Set course for Valdris Prime," he ordered. "But we go in carefully. Full sensor sweeps, and the moment anything feels wrong, we pull back and call for reinforcements."
The journey to Valdris Prime took 6 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity.
During the trip, Marcus found himself in the ship's modified rec room with several of the younger dragons, discussing tactical approaches to unknown threats. The dragons were fascinating to work with because they approached problems from completely different angles than humans. Where human military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force and precise coordination, dragons preferred fluid tactics that adapted moment by moment to changing circumstances.
"You think too much in straight lines," explained Azure, a blue-scaled dragon whose expertise lay in energy manipulation.
Humans plan for specific scenarios and, then, execute those plans regardless of what actually happens.
"It's called discipline," Marcus replied with a smile. "It keeps us alive when everything goes wrong."
"But, what happens when your plans don't account for the actual situation?" countered Crimson, whose red scales marked him as a warrior-born. "We prefer to understand our capabilities and, then, improvise based on what we encounter."
Marcus had to admit there was wisdom in the dragon approach.
His most successful military operations had been the ones where he had been forced to abandon the original plan and adapt to unexpected developments. Maybe the best approach combines both methods, he suggested.
Human planning and logistics with dragon adaptability and improvisation.
The dragons considered this their mental communion, allowing them to exchange ideas faster than human speech could convey. After a moment, they all nodded agreement. "A hybrid approach for hybrid crews," Azure said with satisfaction. When they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Valdris system, Marcus immediately knew something was terribly wrong. His enhanced senses, sharpened by the dragon bond, could feel a wrongness in the very fabric of space around them. "Energy readings are off the scale," reported Martinez from the sensor station. "But, not the kind of energy we're familiar with.
It's like negative energy. It's actually absorbing radiation from the surrounding space."
On the main viewer, Valdris Prime appeared as a gray-brown sphere where it should have been vibrant blue and green. The planet looked drained, desiccated, as if all the life had been sucked out of it and replaced with dust. "Mother of Light," whispered Keeper, his mental voice filled with ancient dread.
"It is them. The hunger returns."
Through the dragon bond, Marcus could feel the emotional resonance of species memories stretching back thousands of years. Fear, yes, but also determination and a kind of grim resolve that spoke of battles fought against impossible odds.
"Options?" he asked the bridge crew.
"We could try a long-range sensor probe," suggested Martinez. "But, based on these readings, I doubt it would survive long enough to transmit useful data."
Whisper shifted into visibility beside Marcus, his shadow scales reflecting the deadlight from Valdris Prime.
"The Devourers do not simply kill," he explained. "They absorb. Everything that made that world alive, the plants, the animals, the very microorganisms in the soil, has been drawn into their collective hunger.
What remains is matter without essence, form without substance."
Marcus stared at the lifeless world and felt something cold settle in his chest.
2 million people had lived on that planet.
Men, women, children, entire families pursuing their dreams and building their futures. Now they were gone, not just dead but somehow unmade, as if they had never existed at all.
"Can they be fought?" he asked.
"They can be resisted," Keeper replied carefully. "In the ancient times, our combined fleets managed to drive them back into the dark spaces between galaxies. But the cost was enormous. Entire worlds were sacrificed just to slow their advance." As they watched, something moved in the space around Valdris Prime. At first Marcus thought it might be debris from orbital facilities, but the movement was too purposeful, too coordinated. As his enhanced vision focused on the objects, he realized they were ships, if ships was the right word for constructs that seemed to be made of crystallized void.
"Contact!" Martinez called out. "Multiple vessels approaching from planetary orbit. Configuration unknown, but they're big. Really big."
The enemy ships, if that's what they were, seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They were visible primarily as ship-shaped absences against the starfield, and looking at them directly made Marcus's eyes water.
"How many?" he asked.
"Sensors can't get a solid count," Martinez replied, frustration clear in her voice. "It's like they're partially phased out of normal space. I'm reading anywhere from 6 to 60 vessels." Through the dragon bond, Marcus felt Keeper reaching out with senses beyond the merely physical, touching the quantum foam that underlay reality itself.
12 ships, the ancient dragon reported. And something else. Something vast that hides behind the planet's shadow. The source of their hunger.
Marcus made his decision quickly. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing an enemy about which they knew almost nothing.
The smart tactical choice would be to retreat and gather reinforcements.
But, somewhere in the galaxy, the Devourers were likely targeting another world, another 2 million innocent lives. And, intelligence gathered now might be the key to saving them.
Red alert, he ordered. All crews to battle stations. We're going in for a closer look.
Sir, Martinez said carefully, that might not be survivable.
Marcus looked around at his crew, human and dragon faces united in determination despite their obvious fear. Maybe not, he agreed. But, we have to try.
If these things are back, the galaxy needs to know what they're capable of. And, maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to hurt them. As the Harmony's edge accelerated toward Veldris Prime and the waiting fleet of void ships, Marcus felt the dragon bond strengthening around him.
Whatever happened next, humans and dragons would face it together.
The ship's intercoms crackled to life as Keeper's voice reached every member of the crew.
Remember this moment, the ancient dragon said.
Today we choose to stand against the dark not because we believe we will win, but because standing against the dark is what defines us as beings worthy of existence.
Whatever our differences in the past, today we are one people with one purpose.
Through the bridge windows, the enemy fleet grew larger and more menacing with each passing moment. But Marcus found himself smiling despite the danger. For the first time since his banishment, he was exactly where he belonged, defending the innocent alongside allies who had become family. The Devourers had returned to the galaxy. But they would find it defended by something they had never faced before, the combined might of humans and dragons united by bonds stronger than fear. The first Devourer ship that intercepted them defied every principle of physics Marcus had learned during his military career. It appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, shifting between visible matter and something that his enhanced senses could only perceive as hungry void. When its weapons fired, they didn't launch projectiles or energy beams, they projected absence itself.
Evasive maneuvers.
Marcus shouted as a lance of nothingness passed within meters of their hull. Where it touched the ship's shields, the energy barriers didn't collapse or overload, they simply ceased to exist. Azure, manning the hybrid tactical station, responded with reflexes that blended human precision with draconic fluidity. The Harmony's edge twisted through space in patterns that would have been impossible for a purely human crew to execute, the dragon's understanding of dimensional physics allowing them to slip between the enemy's attacks like water flowing around stones.
Return fire. Marcus ordered.
The ship's weapons were as hybrid as its crew, human plasma cannons enhanced by dragon fire that burned with temperatures approaching the heart of a star. The combined barrage struck the Devourer vessel's hull and, for a moment, Marcus thought they had actually damaged it. Then, the enemy ship absorbed the energy, growing visibly larger as it fed on the attack. Conventional weapons are ineffective, reported Crimson from the gunnery station, his mental voice carrying frustration and determination in equal measure. It's consuming our attacks and using them to strengthen itself. Through the dragon bond, Marcus felt Keeper's ancient mind reaching back through millennia of species memory, searching for tactics that had worked against the Devourers in the distant past. There, the elderly dragon said suddenly.
I remember now. We cannot fight them with force alone.
They feed on energy, on matter, on the very concept of existence itself.
But, they cannot consume what they cannot comprehend. Meaning what?
Marcus asked as another void lance passed close enough to his ship to make the hull plating groan. Creativity, Whisper replied, materializing beside the command console.
Imagination.
The Devourers are ancient beyond measure, but their age has made them rigid.
They understand only consumption and absorption. Things that are truly new, truly unexpected, these can harm them. Marcus looked around the bridge at his crew, human and dragon faces united by desperate purpose. Ideas, he called out. Lieutenant Martinez spoke up from the sensor station. What if we reverse the polarity on our shields? Instead of keeping energy out, make them projected outward?
Azure's scales rippled with sudden excitement.
Yes. But, not just energy, information. Dragons can encode complex thoughts and emotions into our fire. If we broadcast pure creativity, pure life force.
Crimson caught onto the idea immediately.
The Devourers feast on destruction. What if we fed them creation instead? Overload them with something they cannot digest?
Marcus felt the dragon bond humming with shared inspiration as the crew began working together with unprecedented coordination.
Human technical expertise merged seamlessly with draconic understanding of forces beyond the physical realm.
"Do it," he ordered. "All dragons, prepare to project your life essence through the ship's systems.
All humans, channel every creative thought you've ever had.
Art, music, poetry, the memory of falling in love, everything that makes us alive." The next few minutes were unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Through the dragon bond, he felt his consciousness expand to encompass the entire crew.
Human memories of Earth sunsets and children's laughter merged with draconic recollections of Starbirth and the first songs ever sung.
Individual minds became part of a greater symphony of existence. The harmony's edge began to glow not with the harsh light of weapons fire, but with something softer and infinitely more complex. Every system on the ship became a conduit for the crew's combined creativity, broadcasting the essence of what it meant to be alive into the void around them. The effect on the Devourer ships was immediate and dramatic. The nearest vessel, which had been closing for what Marcus assumed would be a killing blow, suddenly veered away as if it had struck an invisible barrier. Where the broadcast touched its hull, the crystallized void began to crack and fragment.
"It's working!"
Martinez called out, her voice filled with wonder.
"They're actually retreating."
But Marcus could feel through the dragon bond that something much larger was stirring. The massive presence Keeper had sensed behind Valdris Prime was beginning to move, and its attention was now focused entirely on their small ship.
"Brace yourselves," he warned the crew. "Whatever's coming next, it's going to be big."
The thing that emerged from behind the lifeless planet was beyond description. It was less a ship than a manifestation of entropy itself, a vast absence in space that hurt to look at directly. Through the dragon bond, Marcus felt species memories of terror stretching back to the dawn of galactic civilization. The Prime Devourer, Keeper whispered, his mental voice filled with awe and dread.
"I thought they were all destroyed in the ancient war."
The entity's presence pressed against their minds like a psychic weight, threatening to crush their combined consciousness beneath sheer alien malevolence.
But the bond held, human stubbornness reinforcing draconic wisdom in an unbreakable chain of mutual support.
"Keep broadcasting," Marcus ordered through gritted teeth.
"No matter what happens, keep showing it what life looks like."
The Prime Devourer's response was to project pure negation at their ship, not just void lances or energy drains, but the absolute absence of existence itself. Where its attention focused, reality became negotiable. Marcus watched in fascination and terror as portions of the ship's hull simply ceased to be, not destroyed but negated, as if they had never existed in the first place. Emergency barriers slammed down to contain the spreading zones of non-existence, but it was clear that conventional defenses were useless. "We need more power," Azure reported, his scales flickering with the effort of maintaining the life force broadcast.
"The dragons alone aren't enough to sustain this against something that size."
Marcus made a decision that would have horrified his former military commanders but felt absolutely right given what he had learned about cooperation between species. "All crew members, human and dragon, link with the ship's systems directly," he ordered.
"Emergency neural interface protocols."
"We're going to make ourselves part of the broadcast." "Sir," Martinez protested, "direct neural interface with the ship's computers could cause permanent brain damage. We don't have proper safeguards in place." "The dragon bond will protect us," Marcus replied with confidence he didn't entirely feel.
"Trust in the connection."
What followed was perhaps the most intimate cooperation any mixed crew had ever attempted. Humans and dragons linked their minds not just with each other but with the ship itself, turning the harmony's edge into a living extension of their combined will. The life force broadcast intensified beyond anything they had achieved before. Through the neural links, every memory of beauty, every moment of joy, every act of creation or love that any crew member had ever experienced became part of the signal they projected at the Prime Devourer.
The ancient entity's response was immediate and violent.
It turned its full attention on their ship, projecting waves of negation that should have unmade them completely. But the bond held, and the broadcast continued. For the first time in perhaps millions of years, the Prime Devourer encountered something it could not absorb. The pure creativity flowing from the harmony's edge was antithetical to its nature, not just resistant to consumption but actively harmful to touch.
Through the neural link, Marcus felt the moment when the ancient entity experienced something it had not felt since the dawn of time: uncertainty.
"Press the advantage," he urged his crew.
"Show it everything we are, everything we can become together."
The dragons responded by sharing their deepest race memories, the first time they had learned to shape matter with their will, the moment they had discovered music in the vibrations of stellar matter, the joy of flight among the stars. The humans contributed their own treasures, the development of language, the creation of art, the discovery that cooperation could achieve more than competition. But it was the memories they had created together that proved most effective. The moment when Marcus had first chosen to defend the dragon eggs. The dragon's decision to heal him rather than let him die. The gradual building of trust between species that had once been enemies. The growing realization that their combined potential exceeded the sum of their parts. The Prime Devourer arrived in what Marcus could only interpret as pain. Cracks appeared in its structure, not physical damage, but fundamental flaws in its existence as it struggled to process concepts that were utterly alien to its nature. "It's working," Whisper reported, his mental voice filled with amazement. "The creature is actually destabilizing. Our combined essence is poisonous to its existence." But the victory came at a cost. The neural interfaces were overloading under the strain of maintaining the broadcast, and Marcus could feel several crew members beginning to falter under the psychic pressure. "We can't keep this up much longer," he admitted. "We need to find a way to finish this." It was Keeper who provided the answer, drawing on memories of the ancient war that had driven the Devourers from the galaxy. "There is a way," the elderly dragon said, "but it requires the ultimate sacrifice. One of us must enter the Prime Devourer directly, carrying our combined essence into its core. The shock of absorbing pure creativity might be enough to destroy it completely. But whoever makes the journey won't be coming back," Marcus said, understanding immediately. "Perhaps," Keeper agreed. "Or perhaps the dragon bond is strong enough to anchor a soul even in the heart of negation." Marcus looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew, his family, really, forged through shared danger and mutual respect. The decision was easy. "I'll go," he said simply. "No," came the immediate response from every dragon present. "You are the guardian, the bridge between our species. You cannot be risked." "Then, who?" Marcus asked. To his surprise, it was Lieutenant Martinez who stepped forward. "I'll do it," she said quietly. "I've been part of the dragon bond for months now. I can feel them with me, just like you can. And someone needs to make sure the galaxy remembers what we learned here today." Marcus started to protest, but Martinez was already moving toward the ship's experimental transport chamber, a hybrid device that could theoretically beam matter directly through dimensional barriers. "Tell my family I chose this," she said as she stepped into the chamber. "Tell them I wasn't afraid." Before anyone could stop her, she activated the transport and vanished in a swirl of light and shadow. Through the neural link, the entire crew felt her journey into the heart of the Prime Devourer. They experienced her terror as she materialized inside an entity that existed as pure negation. They shared her wonder as she realized that the dragon bond had indeed followed her, creating a small bubble of existence within the void. And they felt her triumph as she released everything they had shared, every memory, every emotion, every creative impulse, directly into the core of the ancient destroyer. The Prime Devourer's death scream echoed across multiple dimensions as it tried desperately to absorb and process the pure essence of creativity that Martinez had carried into its heart. But life force and imagination were poison to its existence, and the feedback loop created by trying to consume them tore the entity apart from within. In minutes that felt like hours, the massive presence that had loomed over Valdris Prime simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed in any conventional sense, but transformed, its infinite hunger converted into infinite potential for creation. As the other Devourer ships fled in confusion and terror, Marcus felt something impossible through the neural link. Martinez was still alive, her consciousness somehow preserved in the quantum foam that remained where the Prime Devourer had been. "I can see everything from here," her voice whispered through the bond. "The whole galaxy, every star, every world. And I can see something else coming, something wonderful. The barriers between dimensions are weakening. Life is going to flourish in ways we never imagined." Marcus closed his eyes and let the implications sink in. The defeat of the Prime Devourer had done more than save Valdris Prime and the surrounding systems. It had fundamentally changed the structure of reality itself, opening pathways for growth and creation that had been blocked for millions of years. When he opened his eyes again, he was looking at a transformed universe, one where the ancient barriers between species meant nothing, where cooperation could literally reshape reality, and where a banished human combatant and a clutch of newborn dragons had become the guardians of infinite possibility.
The war between humans and dragons was over. The age of partnership had begun. 5 years had passed since the defeat of the Prime Devourer, and Marcus Chin stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, watching ships from a dozen different species dock at the massive orbital facility. What had begun as a desperate alliance between humans and dragons had grown into something unprecedented in galactic history, a true confederation of worlds united not by conquest or treaty, but by shared understanding of what cooperation could achieve. The station itself was a marvel of hybrid engineering, its design incorporating elements from every member species of what had come to be known as the Harmony Alliance. Human structural efficiency merged with draconic energy manipulation, enhanced by Zephyrian gravity controls and Valdari temporal stabilizers. The result was not just functional but beautiful, a crystalline flower blooming in space, its petals housing millions of beings from across the galaxy. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum of the observation deck, Marcus could see ships that would have been considered impossible just a few years before. Vessels that phased between dimensions, craft that traveled by folding space around themselves, and transports that seemed to be made of living light. The defeat of the Prime Devourer had indeed weakened the barriers between dimensions, leading to technological advances that none of the species could have achieved alone. Still amazed by what we built, asked a familiar voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Sarah Martinez approaching, her form slightly translucent but otherwise unchanged from the day she had sacrificed herself to destroy the Prime Devourer. Her consciousness had been preserved in what the dragons called the Quantum Garden, a realm of pure possibility that existed between dimensions. Every day, Marcus replied with a smile. Though I have to admit, watching you walk through walls still takes some getting used to. Martinez laughed, the sound carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Being a quantum consciousness has its advantages, she said. I can be in several places at once, communicate directly with any technology in the station, and see probability streams that stretch into the future. The perspective is enlightening. She gestured toward the bustling docking bays below them, where crews of mixed species worked together with the kind of seamless coordination that had once seemed impossible. See that freighter coming in from the outer rim? It's carrying refugees from 3 different worlds that were threatened by dimensional storms. 5 years ago, those species would have been at war with each other. Now they're sharing the same refugee camps and working together to rebuild. Marcus nodded, remembering the reports he had been reading. The weakening of dimensional barriers hadn't been entirely beneficial. Reality storms and pocket dimensions had appeared throughout the galaxy, threatening worlds and displacing populations. But the Harmony Alliance had responded with unprecedented cooperation, turning crisis into opportunity for unity. Any word from the deep survey teams? He asked. Martinez's expression grew thoughtful. The Dragon's long-range patrols have found something interesting in the Andromeda approach vectors. Signals that suggest other species are dealing with similar dimensional changes. Keeper thinks we might be about to make contact with civilizations that existed in parallel dimensions. Before Marcus could respond, he felt the familiar mental touch of Keeper himself reaching out through the dragon bond. The ancient dragon's consciousness had grown even more vast and complex over the years, enhanced by his role as coordinator for the Alliance's expanding network of species. Guardian, Keeper's mental voice carried undertones of excitement and anticipation. Your presence is requested in the assembly chamber. The representatives have reached a decision about the expansion protocol. Marcus exchanged a look with Martinez. The expansion protocol had been under debate for months, a proposal to actively seek out and make contact with other dimensional civilizations rather than waiting for them to find the Alliance. This should be interesting, Martinez said. I'll meet you there. The quantum pathways are faster than walking. Marcus made his way through the station's corridors, marveling as always at the diversity of beings he encountered. Humans walked alongside dragons whose scales had adapted to project holographic displays. Zephyrian crystalline entities shared conversations with Valdari timeseers. Children of mixed heritage, some impossible combinations that should not have been able to exist, played games that incorporated multiple dimensional perspectives. The assembly chamber was the heart of New Harmony Station, a vast spherical space where representatives from every Alliance world could gather either physically or through quantum projection. As Marcus entered, he could see that the chamber was fuller than usual, with beings present from even the most remote member worlds. Keeper occupied his usual position at the center of the sphere, his massive form coiled around a crystalline structure that allowed him to interface directly with the station's communication systems. Around him, arranged in concentric circles, sat representatives from dozens of species.
"Ah, Guardian," called out Ambassador Thranks, the Zephyrian crystalline being who served as the Alliance's chief diplomat.
"Your timing is perfect.
We have just voted to approve the expansion protocol." Marcus felt a thrill of excitement mixed with apprehension. The protocol would commit the Alliance to an ambitious program of dimensional exploration, seeking out parallel civilizations and offering them membership in the growing Confederation. The vote was unanimous, reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, one of the few other humans present in the chamber. She had become the Alliance's chief xenobiologist, studying the new lifeforms that had begun appearing as dimensional barriers weakened.
Every species agrees that isolation is no longer an option. The dimensional changes are affecting the entire galaxy cluster.
We need to find allies and share our knowledge of how to manage the transitions. Through the Dragon Bond, Marcus could feel Keeper's satisfaction with the decision, along with something deeper anticipation of challenges and discoveries that lay ahead. "There is more," Keeper announced, his mental voice reaching every being present.
"Our deep scouts have detected something extraordinary in the quantum foam around the galactic core.
Evidence of a vast intelligence, possibly artificial, that seems to be coordinating the dimensional changes." A ripple of concern passed through the assembled representatives.
An artificial intelligence powerful enough to manipulate galactic-scale dimensional barriers would represent either a tremendous opportunity or an existential threat.
"Do we know anything about its intentions?" asked Captain Zhou, one of the human military commanders who had joined the Alliance after witnessing the cooperation between species. "Unknown," admitted Whisper, materializing near the chamber's edge. "But the patterns suggest purpose rather than random change.
Someone or something is deliberately weakening the barriers between dimensions." Martinez's quantum form appeared beside Marcus, her translucent features showing concern. "I've been monitoring probability streams," she said.
"There's a convergence coming, a moment when all the dimensional barriers in this region of space will be at their weakest. When that happens, either we'll gain access to unimaginable possibilities, or everything we know will be torn apart by forces we can't control." Marcus looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had learned to trust each other despite their vast differences. They had come so far from the days when humans and dragons saw each other as enemies, when each species believed itself superior to all others.
"How long do we have?" he asked.
"Based on current progression rates," Dr. Vasquez replied, consulting her holographic displays, "approximately 18 months until the convergence reaches critical threshold." "Then, we use that time," Marcus declared, feeling the Dragon Bond pulse with agreement from Keeper and the others.
"We implement the expansion protocol immediately.
We find every species we can, share our knowledge, and prepare for whatever comes next together."
Over the following months, New Harmony Station became the launching point for the most ambitious exploration program in galactic history.
Ships crewed by mixed species departed daily for coordinates in parallel dimensions, carrying messages of friendship and offers of alliance. The discoveries were astounding. They found civilizations that had evolved in universes where physics worked differently, species that existed as pure energy or crystallized thought, and cultures that had learned to navigate between dimensions as easily as humans once sailed between islands. Some contact missions were immediate successes. The Harmony Alliance gained new member species almost weekly, each bringing unique perspectives and capabilities that enhanced the collective knowledge of all. Other encounters were more challenging, requiring delicate negotiations with beings whose thought processes were so alien that communication took months to establish. But perhaps the most significant discovery came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Martinez, using her quantum consciousness to explore the deepest layers of dimensional reality, encountered traces of the intelligence that was orchestrating the dimensional changes. "It's not what we thought," she reported during one of the regular assembly sessions.
"The intelligence isn't artificial, it's collective.
A merger of thousands of species from dimensions that are collapsing due to entropy.
They're trying to preserve themselves by creating stable zones in our reality." The implications were staggering.
The dimensional changes weren't an attack or an invasion, they were a desperate attempt at survival by beings whose own universe was dying.
"How many refugees are we talking about?" asked Ambassador Thranks. Martinez's form flickered as she accessed probability streams that stretched across multiple realities. "Millions of species. Billions of individuals. Maybe more.
Their home dimensions are being consumed by a form of entropy that makes the devourers look like minor nuisances." Marcus felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders.
The Harmony Alliance had grown strong, but could they accommodate refugees from entire dying universes?
We have a choice, Keeper observed, his mental voice reaching every being present. We can resist the dimensional changes and try to preserve our reality as it was, or we can embrace them and help create something new.
What would that something new look like? Captain Joe asked.
It was Marcus who answered, drawing on insights gained from years of cooperation between former enemies.
A galaxy where the barriers between dimensions mean as little as the old barriers between species, he said.
Where beings from any reality can work together, share knowledge, and create wonders that none of them could achieve alone. The debate that followed was intense but not acrimonious.
The representatives had learned to disagree with respect, to consider multiple perspectives before making decisions that would affect billions of lives.
In the end, the vote was even more decisive than the one that had approved the expansion protocol. The Alliance would welcome the dimensional refugees, working with them to manage the convergence in a way that preserved the best of all realities while creating space for something entirely new. As the session concluded and representatives departed to carry the news to their home worlds, Marcus remained in the chamber with Keeper and Martinez. Through the transparent walls, he could see the constant traffic of ships arriving and departing, beings from across the galaxy and beyond, united in purpose despite their vast differences.
"Do you think it will work?" he asked quietly.
"It has to," Martinez replied, her quantum form pulsing with determination. "The alternative is to let fear divide us again, and we've seen where that leads." Keeper's mental voice carried the weight of ancient wisdom and hard-won hope.
5 years ago, a banished human soldier chose to defend dragon eggs rather than save himself.
That single act of compassion set in motion changes that reshaped the galaxy. Now we face an even greater challenge, but we face it together. Through the dragon bond, Marcus felt the presence of thousands of minds, human, dragon, and dozens of other species, all connected by shared purpose and mutual respect. The banished combatant who had died defending a dragon nest had become the guardian of something unprecedented, a civilization built not on conquest or dominance, but on the revolutionary idea that cooperation was stronger than conflict. The convergence was coming, and, with it, challenges that would test every species in ways they had never imagined. But Marcus looked forward to the future with confidence rather than fear. They had learned the most important lesson in the universe: when beings chose to trust each other despite their differences, there was no limit to what they could achieve together. In the depths of space, dimensional barriers continued to weaken and strengthen in patterns that suggested vast intelligence at work. Refugees from dying realities gathered at the borders of stable dimensions, hoping for sanctuary. And, on New Harmony Station, representatives of 100 worlds worked together to prepare for the greatest transformation in galactic history.
The age of isolation was ending. The age of infinite possibility was about to begin.
And, at the heart of it all, the bond between a banished human warrior and the dragons who had repaid his kindness continued to grow stronger, proving that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was simply the willingness to protect those who could not protect themselves.